The acrid smell of burning chemicals hit Sophia Chen's nostrils the moment she stepped out of her Tesla. The entire east wing of the Meridian Research Institute was engulfed in flames. Orange tongues licking at the night sky like hungry demons. She could hear screaming from inside the building. Dr. Chen, security guard, rushed toward her, his face streaked with soot. "You can't go in there. The whole lab section is compromised." But Sophia was already running, her designer heels clicking against the wet pavement. 3 years of her life's work was in that building. It's the revolutionary cancer treatment that could save millions. The research that would finally prove she was more than just another pretty face who'd inherited her father's pharmaceutical empire. The heat slammed into her as she burst through the emergency exit. Smoke filled her lungs, making her eyes water. Through the haze, she could see a figure hunched over a computer terminal in Lab 7, frantically typing while flames crept closer. "Are you insane?" she screamed, grabbing the man's arm. "We have to get out of here." He spun around, and she found herself staring into the most intensely blue eyes she'd ever seen. Dr. Marcus Reid, the brilliant biochemist who'd been stealing her research methods. The man who'd made her life hell for the past 6 months, with his cocky attitude and infuriating habit of being right about everything. "Your compound," he said, his voice rough from smoke. "The X-47 serum. I can save the data, but I need 30 more seconds." The ceiling groaned ominously above them. Sparks rained down like deadly confetti. "That data is classified." Sophia yanked harder on his arm, but he was stronger than he looked. "Leave it. This could cure leukemia in children, Sophia." 30 seconds. The way he said her name, desperate and raw, made something twist in her chest. She'd never heard him speak without that maddening arrogance before. 20 seconds, she found herself saying, positioning herself between him and the approaching flames. The explosion that followed threw them both across the room. Sophia's last coherent thought before her head hit the wall was that Marcus Reid had just risked his life to save her research. The same research he'd been trying to discredit for months. When she woke up in the hospital 12 hours later, her left arm was in a cast. Her face was covered in bandages, and Marcus Reid was sitting in the chair beside her bed, looking like he'd been through a blender. "The data," she whispered through cracked lips. "Safe." He held up a small flash drive, along with something else you might find interesting. Her heart stopped as he pulled out a manila folder marked "Confidential," Meridian board minutes. "Turns out," Marcus said softly, "we've both been played. The explosion wasn't an accident, Sophia. Someone wanted your research destroyed, and they wanted us to destroy each other in the process." Outside her hospital window, rain began to fall, washing the last of the smoke from the air. But inside room 314, the real fire was just beginning to burn. 3 days later, Sophia's penthouse apartment felt like a prison. The press had been relentless, camping outside her building with cameras and microphones, hungry for any scrap of information about the Meridian incident. Her father's pharmaceutical empire, Chen Industries, had seen its stock price plummet overnight. She was staring out at the city skyline when her doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she could see Marcus standing in the hallway, his dark hair still bearing traces of bandages, a laptop bag slung over his shoulder. "You shouldn't be here," she said as she opened the door. "The reporters will have a field day if they see you. Let them." He stepped inside without invitation, his presence immediately filling her pristine living space. "We have bigger problems than gossip." Marcus opened his laptop on her marble dining table, revealing spreadsheets, email chains, and what looked like financial records. "Your stepmother, Victoria," he began without preamble. "She's been selling information about your research to Blackstone Pharmaceuticals for the past 8 months. Sophia's breath caught. Victoria Chen, her father's second wife, had always been cold toward her. But corporate espionage seemed beyond even her capabilities. "That's impossible. She doesn't have access to my lab data. She doesn't need access to your lab." Marcus pulled up a series of photographs. "She has access to your computer, your apartment, your personal files." The photos showed Victoria in Sophia's home office photographing documents with her phone. The timestamps revealed she'd been doing this for months, always when Sophia was at the institute. "How did you get these?" Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus hesitated. "I hired a private investigator to follow you 6 months ago. The confession hit her like a physical blow.
What?
I thought you were sabotaging my research. My grants kept getting denied. My lab access was restricted. And every time I'd present findings, you'd mysteriously come up with something better the next day, so you had me followed. Yes, his jaw tightened, and I discovered that we were both being manipulated. Victoria wasn't just stealing your research, Sophia. She was feeding me information about your schedule, your methods, your weaknesses. She wanted us at each other's throats. Sophia sank into her leather chair, the weight of betrayal crushing down on her. Why? What does she gain from destroying my work? Marcus leaned forward, his eyes intense. Blackstone has been developing a rival cancer treatment. If your X47 serum reaches market first, it could cost them billions. But if your research is discredited, if you're seen as reckless and dangerous after the explosion, then their treatment becomes the only viable option. The explosion. Understanding dawned on her. It wasn't meant to kill us. It was meant to destroy my credibility. And it almost worked. Marcus's hand moved across the table, stopping just short of touching hers. If I hadn't saved that data, if you hadn't survived to continue your work, Victoria would have inherited your father's company and buried your research forever. The space between them seemed to crackle with electricity. For months, they'd been enemies, trading barbs and competing for recognition. Now, sitting in her apartment with the afternoon sun casting shadows across his bruised face, Sophia realized she'd never really seen him before. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. Marcus was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, with an emotion she couldn't identify. "Because I've spent 6 months trying to hate you, Sophia, and I've failed spectacularly." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message. The number was blocked, but the message was clear. "Stop digging, or the next explosion will be fatal. You have 48 hours to withdraw your research and resign from Meridian. This is your only warning." Marcus read the message over her shoulder, his body tensing. "We need to disappear, tonight. I'm not running from my own life. Then you might not have a life to run from much longer." He closed the laptop, his movements sharp and decisive. "Pack a bag, Sophia. We're going to finish this research together, and we're going to expose everyone who tried to destroy us. But we can't do it if we're dead." As if on cue, the lights in her apartment flickered and went out. In the sudden darkness, Sophia could hear footsteps in the hallway outside her door. "Too late," Marcus whispered, pulling her toward the balcony. "We go now, or we don't go at all." 20 stories below. The city lights twinkled like fallen stars, waiting to catch them if they were brave enough to jump. The abandoned textile factory on the outskirts of Portland smelled like rust and broken dreams. Sophia pulled her jacket tighter as Marcus led her through the maze of defunct machinery, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. "You're sure about this place?" she asked, glancing nervously at the shadows that seemed to move in the corners of her vision. "My grandfather worked here for 30 years. I know every inch." Marcus stopped beside an old industrial elevator, pressing a sequence of buttons that shouldn't have worked on equipment this old. To her surprise, the doors groaned open. "The basement level has been my backup lab for the past 2 years. The elevator descended into darkness, then opened to reveal something that took Sophia's breath away. The basement had been transformed into a state-of-the-art research facility. Pristine white walls, advanced equipment, and computer monitors displaying complex molecular structures. "How is this possible?" she breathed. "Black market funding." Marcus's admission was matter of fact. "When legitimate sources dried up, I found alternative investors. People who care more about results than regulations. That's highly illegal." "Marcus, so is attempted murder." He activated the main lighting system, revealing the full scope of his hidden laboratory. "Your stepmother's people found us faster than I expected. You barely made it out of your apartment alive. They'd escaped. Through the building's service elevator, emerging in the parking garage as black SUVs surrounded the main entrance. Now, 12 hours later, they were officially fugitives from both the law and whatever private army Victoria had hired. Sophia approached one of the workstations, recognizing her own research displayed on multiple screens. "You've been continuing?" "My work. completing it. Marcus joined her, his shoulder brushing against hers as he pointed to a complex diagram. Your X-47 serum was brilliant, but it was missing a key component. A stabilizing agent that would prevent the cellular breakdown. We saw in the early trials. I spent 2 years trying to solve that problem, I know. Spent 6 months solving it for you. She turned to face him, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Because I'm in love with your mind, Sophia Chen. I have been since. The day you published your first paper on targeted cellular regeneration, his confession hung in the air between them like a challenge. I convinced myself I hated you because it was easier than admitting I was obsessed with you. The admission should have felt like victory, but instead it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Marcus. The formula works, he continued, his voice low and intense. I've run it through every simulation, every predictive model. But we need live trials, and we need them now. Because according to my sources, Victoria is planning to have us killed within the next 24 hours. What kind of sources? Marcus hesitated, then walked to a locked cabinet, retrieving a satellite. Phone. The kind that operate outside legal boundaries. The kind that Victoria doesn't know about. As if summoned by his words, the phone rang. Marcus answered it, his face growing progressively darker as he listened. We have a problem, he said after. Hanging up, Victoria's not working alone. Your father's business partner, Richard Blackstone, has been planning this hostile takeover for years. Explosion, the sabotage, even hiring me initially. It was all designed to eliminate you as a threat to his empire. Asterisk, my father hired you. Blackstone did. Through intermediaries. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as his tell when he was stressed. I was supposed to discredit your research, make you look incompetent. Instead, I fell for you so hard I started sabotaging my own career to protect yours. The revelation hit her like ice water. Everything between us has been manipulation. No, his response was fierce, immediate. The job was manipulation. The surveillance was manipulation. But this, he gestured between them. What's happening? Right now, that's the first real thing I've felt in years. Before she could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red emergency lights bathed everything in hellish illumination as Marcus rushed to the security monitors. They found us, he said grimly. 6 vehicles, heavily armed. We have maybe 3 minutes before they breach the main entrance. Sophia looked around the laboratory at years of research that could save countless lives. At the man who'd risked everything to help her complete her work. Can we get the data out? Not all of it. We can take the essential files, but most of this will be destroyed, and we make a choice. She began rapidly typing commands into the main computer system. We upload everything to the cloud, make it public, and let the world decide what happens next. If you do that, there's no going back. Victoria and Blackstone will have to kill us to protect themselves. They're already trying to kill us? Sophia's fingers flew across the keyboard, initiating upload sequences that would scatter her life's work across dozens of secure servers worldwide. At least this way, our deaths might mean something. The sound of explosions echoed from above as the upload progress bar crawled toward completion. Marcus grabbed her hand, his skin warm against her cold fingers. Sophia, if we don't make it out of here, we will, she said firmly. Though her heart was racing, we have to. It needs this cure, and I'm not done fighting for it. The upload completed just as the lights went out and the sound of boots on metal stairs filled the air. In the darkness, Sophia felt Marcus pull her toward what she hoped was another way out. But as they reached the emergency exit, she realized they weren't running toward safety. They were running toward the most dangerous gamble of their lives. The safe house was a modest cabin tucked into the Oregon mountains, surrounded by towering pines that creaked in the wind like old bones. Sophia sat cross-legged on the worn wooden floor, her laptop balanced on her knees as she monitored the viral spread of their leaked research across social media and scientific journals. 47,000 downloads in the first hour, she reported to Marcus, who was pacing by the window like a caged animal. The scientific community is going crazy. 3 major cancer research centers have already announced they're beginning independent trials based on our formula. Good. Marcus's voice was tight with tension. That means even if Victoria and Blackstone kill us, the research survives. Still planning on dying, are we? I'm planning on being realistic. He turned from the window, his face haggard from 3 sleepless nights. My contact just confirmed that Blackstone has put a $20 million bounty on our heads. Every assassin, mercenary, and desperate criminal on the West Coast is hunting us. Sophia closed the laptop and studied his face. What aren't you telling me? Marcus hesitated, then pulled out his satellite phone. Victoria called an hour ago. And you didn't think to mention this? She wants to meet tonight. Says she has information about who really killed your mother. The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. Her mother had died in a car accident when Sophia was 15. A tragic, random event that had shaped her entire life, driving her toward medical research in a desperate attempt to save lives she couldn't save then. My mother's death was an accident, was it? Marcus showed her the phone, where a text message displayed a photograph she'd never seen before. Her mother's car, wrapped around a tree, but with damage patterns that looked nothing like an accident. Victoria claims she has evidence that Richard Blackstone had your mother killed to eliminate her influence over your father's company, Sophia's. Hands began to shake. That's impossible. Why would she tell us this? Because she wants to make a deal. Our research data in exchange for justice for your mother and guaranteed protection from Blackstone's people. You believe her? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I believe she's desperate enough to tell the truth, if it serves her purposes.
Nice.
The question is whether we're desperate enough to trust her.
Thanks.
The cabin's landline phone rang, an ancient rotary device that seemed absurdly out of place in their high-tech conspiracy. Marcus answered it, his face growing pale as he listened. That was the FBI, he said after hanging up. They're issuing federal warrants for our arrest. Corporate espionage, theft of proprietary research, destruction of private property. Has convinced them we're the criminals in this scenario. Victoria has to be. She's covering her tracks, making us look like the villains while she positions herself as the victim. Marcus began gathering their few belongings with sharp, angry movements. Can't stay here. This place was compromised the moment we made contact with the outside world. Sophia stood, sudden resolve hardening in her chest. Then we go to her. Sophia, it's obviously a trap. Of course it's a trap. But it's also our only chance to end this before more people die. She pulled on her jacket, checking that the backup drive containing their research was secure in the inner pocket. If Victoria has evidence about my mother's murder, I need to see it. And if she's lying, then we make sure the world knows exactly what kind of monster she really is. They drove through the night in a stolen pickup truck. Following GPS coordinates Victoria had provided to an abandoned warehouse district outside Seattle. The meeting location was a pier that stretched out into the black waters of Puget Sound. Fog rolling in from the ocean like ghostly fingers. Victoria was waiting for them at the end of the pier, her elegant silhouette outlined against the distant city lights. Even in the cold and mist, she looked immaculate, her silver hair perfectly styled, her designer coat pristine. Sophia, darling, she called as they approached. You look terrible. This fugitive lifestyle really doesn't suit you. Cut the act, Victoria. Show us what you have. Victoria smiled, but it was a cold expression that never reached her eyes, always so direct, just like your mother. She pulled out a manila envelope, thick with documents and photographs. Helen was investigating Richard's business practices. When she died, she'd discovered his illegal drug trials, his connections to organized crime, his plans to eliminate competitors through violence. Sophia's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside were bank records, correspondence between her mother and federal investigators, and photographs of meetings between Blackstone and known criminals. She was going to expose him, Victoria continued, so he had her killed and made it look like an accident. Your father never knew. He has spent the last 15 years in business partnership with his wife's murderer. Why are you telling us this? Marcus demanded, his voice sharp with suspicion. Because Richard has decided I'm a liability too. Victoria's composure cracked slightly, revealing genuine fear beneath the polished surface. He knows I've been feeding information to multiple parties trying to play all sides. He's planning to eliminate me along with you too, and frame the entire conspiracy on my dead body. So you want to team up? Sophia asked incredulously. I want to survive. And I want Richard Blackstone to pay for what he's done to both our families. Victoria pulled out her phone, showing them a video file. I have recordings of Richard confessing to your mother's murder. Detailed discussions of his plans to eliminate you and take over Chen Industries completely. Enough evidence to put him away for life. In exchange for what? Your research data, a public statement exonerating me of any wrongdoing, and a partnership in bringing your cancer treatment to market through legitimate channels. Sophia looked at Marcus, seeing her own uncertainty reflected in his eyes. Victoria's offer could end their nightmare, but it could also be the final trap that destroyed them both. We need time to think, Marcus said. Time is a luxury we don't have. Victoria's phone buzzed, and her face went white as she read the message. Richard's people are already here. As if summoned by her words, the sound of boat engines echoed across the water, and spotlights began sweeping the pier from multiple directions. You set us up, Sophia breathed. No, Victoria said, backing toward the edge of the pier. I think we were all set up. The first gunshot shattered the night air. All three of them dove for cover behind concrete barriers as armed figures rappelled from helicopters onto the pier. In the chaos of gunfire and shouting voices, Sophia realized that Victoria's betrayal might be the least of their problems, because the men hunting them weren't interested in taking prisoners. The federal courthouse in downtown Seattle was a fortress of marble and steel, its neoclassical columns gleaming in the morning sun as Sophia walked up the front steps. 6 months had passed since the night on the pier, 6 months of investigations, hearings and trials that had torn apart the pharmaceutical industry and exposed decades of corruption. Marcus was waiting for her at the top of the steps, wearing a charcoal suit that made his blue eyes even more striking. The last of his physical injuries from their ordeal had healed, but she could still see the emotional scars in the way he carried himself. The careful alertness that never quite left his expression. Ready for this? He asked, offering her his arm, as ready as anyone can be to watch their stepmother get sentenced for conspiracy to commit murder. They walked through the metal detectors and past the throng of reporters who'd been covering the Blackstone conspiracy trial for weeks. Inside the courtroom, Victoria sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, her perfect composure. Finally cracked, her cooperation with federal investigators had reduced her sentence, but she was still facing 25 years in prison. Richard Blackstone had received life without parole the previous month, his empire of illegal drug trials. Corporate espionage and contract killings had crumbled under the weight of evidence that Victoria had provided, including the recording of him confessing to ordering Helen Chen's murder. Judge Martinez called the court to order, and Sophia found herself holding her breath as Victoria was asked to stand for sentencing. Mrs. Chen, the judge began, your cooperation with federal authorities has been noted by this court. However, your actions resulted in the deaths of 7 people, including your own husband, and nearly resulted in the suppression of medical research that could save thousands of lives. Sophia's father had died of a heart attack 3 months into the investigation. The stress of discovering his business partner's crimes and his wife's betrayal proving too much for his already fragile health. His death had hit Sophia harder than she'd expected, leaving her the sole heir to Chen Industries and the weight of its reconstruction. You are hereby sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole in 10 years. Victoria's shoulders sagged as she was led away in handcuffs. She caught Sophia's eye as she passed, mouthing a single word, sorry. Sophia wasn't sure if she believed it, but she found she no longer cared. Forgiveness was a luxury she couldn't afford to worry about when there was so much work left to do. Outside the courthouse, Marcus pulled her aside, away from the reporters and cameras. So what happens now? He asked. You're the head of a pharmaceutical empire. I'm a biochemist with a questionable past in a hidden laboratory.
Yes.
Where does that leave us? Sophia smiled, the first genuine smile she'd felt in months. It leaves us with work to do. The X47 serum. Trials start next month at 15 different medical centers. We have cancer to cure, Marcus. Is that a job offer, Dr. Chen? It's a partnership offer, Dr. Reid. Equal shares, equal authority, equal responsibility. She paused, studying his face. In business and in life, if you're interested. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the Seattle skyline through the courthouse windows. I'm probably going to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for how this all started. Surveillance, the manipulation, the lies. I know. Sophia stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. But we're not the same people we were 6 months ago. We've been through fire together, literally and figuratively. We've seen each other at our worst and our best. If we can't trust each other now, after everything we've survived, then we'll never trust anyone. And if we fail, if the treatment doesn't work, if we can't save the lives we're promising to save, then we fail together. But we don't stop trying. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Sophia's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a simple platinum ring with a diamond that caught the light captured. Starfire. I bought this 3 months ago, he said quietly. Right after your father's funeral, when I realized I didn't want to spend another day of my life without you in it. But I've been terrified to ask because everything between us started with so much deception. Marcus. I love you, Sophia Chen. Not because of your research. It's not because of your money or your company or your brilliant mind, though I love all of those things too. I love you because you're brave enough to risk everything for people you'll never meet. Because you choose hope over cynicism every single day. Because when the world tried to destroy us, you refused to let it win. Tears were streaming down Sophia's face as he dropped to one knee on the courthouse steps, oblivious to the reporters who were frantically snapping photos and rolling cameras. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that some good can come from even the worst circumstances? Sophia looked down at him, this brilliant, flawed, complicated man who'd risked his life to save her work and then stood by her side as they fought to expose the truth. She thought about her mother, about the research that could save millions of lives, about the future they could build together from the ashes of everything they'd lost. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, yes. Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger. The crowd of reporters burst into applause. But Sophia barely heard them. She was thinking about the children who would live because of their work, about the families who wouldn't have to say goodbye too soon, about the world they were going to change together. 2 years later, the X47 serum would be approved by the FDA and distributed globally at cost, saving over 100,000 lives in its first year alone. Chen-Red Pharmaceuticals would become the gold standard for ethical medical research. Founded on principles of transparency and humanitarian access to life-saving treatments.
Yes.
But standing on those courthouse steps, with Marcus's arms around her and their future spreading out before them like an unwritten book, Sophia Chen knew that their greatest discovery wasn't a cure for cancer. It was learning that love, like science, required both faith and evidence, and that sometimes the most beautiful reactions came from the most volatile compounds. Asterisk the end. Asterisk like this video, if the story touched your heart. Subscribe for more emotional tales and share with someone who believes in the power of true love, and let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.